And now
Well,
we're back to who built these? When were they built? See, obviously, they had some technology that we don't have. And this craziness of sliding them up ramps that are so vertically inclined and having rollers on the ramps that they could just move them up. And then there was another fellow that was showing other rollers, and he literally just pushed one of these huge pieces of stone like this, and it went all the way across. Well, here's the problem with that. That works on level ground. It
yeah.
doesn't work on an incline.
It's because people are desperately trying to understand the construction of the pyramids using their present knowledge. And the present knowledge would indicate it has to be a ramp. There's no other way of getting heavy blocks of stone. And don't forget that some of the blocks weigh 70 tons. They're the weight of the granite blocks on the ceiling of the king's chamber, which is 200 foot above ground level. So they say, well, how would you get a 70-ton block of granite 200 foot into the air? Ah, you build a big ramp, which contains more material than the pyramid itself, and you pull it up. Well, have they ever tried it? Have they ever tried to demonstrate that that is feasible? No, they haven't. Remember the story of the Nova production building a little pyramid?
Actually, it was the Japanese that did this. What they had done was they had built that small pyramid, but then they got the cap that they had constructed. They only drug it just to the base, and that's as far as they could get it. And then they called in this huge blue crane to lift the cap to the top. Well, that didn't work in Egypt because they had no hydraulic cranes back then.
They hadn't invented hydraulic cranes. They had wooden pulleys.
So again, there's no way that they had the tools to do this. And not only the tools to do this, but he's also saying that they would have first had to have dug out a foundation. Well, how on earth are you going to dig out a foundation when you don't have the tools to churn the ground up? And then you'd have to have shovels with thousands of workers to throw all of the debris in baskets and take it away. But
Yeah,
if they did
where it,
that, where's the debris? Where's
yeah,
all this material once again? There is no evidence or trace of it.
exactly. It's one of the big mysteries of ancient history. Where did all the spoil go when they built these things?
There was another thing. When the SLD technique was used on a couple of samples taken from the Osiris shaft, the age was calculated to be around 3000 BCE, placing it about 500 years before the Pharaonic age, before the age of the pharaohs.
I.e., pre-dynastic. Before the age of the pharaohs is defined as pre-dynastic, before the dynasties.
So again, the age was calculated to be 3,450 plus or minus 950 BCE, which is 1,000 years prior to the Pharaonic age, possibly older.
The Great Pyramid was supposed to have been built 2650 BC. So that was going on well before that. The point about looking for ancient artifacts to confirm some of this is a bit of a problem because if those artifacts are anything other than stone, they will have disappeared. They will have gone away. They will have rotted if it was cloth, paper, or papyrus. They wouldn't exist. Most metals would have rusted or oxidized. So it's not possible to find a lot of the information because it just doesn't exist anymore. The only thing which will exist is stone. Stone retains its integrity over many, many thousands of years, especially hard stone such as granite, diorite, quartz, obsidian. These are all hard stone, but they all derive from one location, and that is a volcano. They come from inside the earth. Volcanoes produce granite, and the nearest source of granite to Giza is Aswan, which is 500 miles south of Giza.
Yes, and again, all you see are these videos of these scientists claiming that they placed all of these blocks on reed boats. Well, the reed boats would sink. I've seen a lot of videos where they're using AI and they have these big barges that are going up and down the Nile River, especially one. And this one barge has at least 270-ton granite blocks on them. And this is what these people are trying to say happened. They just pushed all of these blocks magically onto this barge. How on earth did they pile the granite stones up that high on a barge to fit 200 of these cut stones onto that barge? There's over
Yeah.
200 of them in this one example that this guy is showing, and it's a flat boat. Well, I don't care how flat the boat is, it's not going to work. That boat would have bottomed out somewhere along the line. There's another one that they're showing where these guys are pushing that granite off of one of those boats and it crashes into the water. You're telling me one man is going to push a 70-ton block off of a boat, it falls in the water, and then you're going to fish it out. It's not going to
Yeah.
work. It's not going to
Yeah.
happen. So I don't understand how these guys can say that. It reminds me of the Martian Chronicles, where you see these big, huge sand ships that are sailing across the desert on the desert floor. What's happening here? Are those ships in the Martian Chronicles levitating? No, they're not levitating. They're literally being pushed by the Martian winds across the sand. Is this what's happening on Earth because we have more of wind, more atmosphere? Or is the atmosphere pushing those bricks now? Is that what they're going to say?
It's
You
all
know,
fantasy.
then they're showing these contraptions that look like sleds that you'd get in the 50s and 60s. And they're putting these stones on top of those. And then they're throwing water in front of them and then they're dragging them along. Well, folks, have you ever put water on sand and then tried to drag a sled across the sand? It's going to stick. You've just added more friction.
Exactly.
But that's
So,
not going to work either.
so there's no logical thinking behind any of this. It's all fantasy.
And then one guy had a good illustration. He made this video and he's showing these Egyptians building the pyramid and they're just tossing 70-ton blocks to each other. One catches it, passes it on, one catches it, passes it on. you
Yeah.
know, because that's about how ridiculous this whole thing is. He's just
Yeah.
making a parody of it.
Yeah. It's people producing amusing stories. It's okay to do that. There's no harm in producing it. But if you think about it for a couple of minutes, you'll soon see that it's totally impossible to achieve physically because you have to take into account the physical limitations.
Then there's another one.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
This is one where these engineers got together, they put out this video, and now everyone else is copying them. And what it is they have these 70-ton blocks of granite, all pre-cut, they're all cut. Now they're going to load them into position. So they pump all this water up on top of the pyramid, and they have locks on them. So they open the gate up, and the water comes in, they close the gate. Then they open up the other gate, the water goes in, they close the gate, and then on the other gate, on the other side, they have the blocks, 70-ton blocks in them, and they're all hooked up to these ballots, these flotation devices. And there's loads and loads of them on top of each brick. And so what they're saying is that now when they let the water in on the third lock, it goes in, and now the granite blocks start to float. Then they have Egyptians up on the top with staffs and they just push them along to where they need to go. They open up the other lock, the water drains out, and the bricks come down and they settle into place where they want them. How are you going to pump tons of water 200 feet in the air and then 300 feet and then 400 feet in the air? That's
Yeah,
not go- These guys don't explain any of it.
no, it's fantasy as usual.
I don't know who's pumping the water, but they have this one guy inside of this wheel spinning the wheel around like a hamster, and that is making this plunger go up and down. It's a primitive pump that's pumping all the water 200 feet into the air. Well, what about the back pressure? You have all that water trying to come back down again, so now you're telling me that they have material that's going to handle the back pressure of that water.
Surely they would be better off using an Archimedes screw, which is designed to lift water. It's a basic device. It was known about thousands of years ago. It's used for irrigation. It lifts water out of a canal into a field. That's understandable. But to lift 70-ton blocks of granite, come on,
Yeah.
get real. A 70-ton block of granite, when it falls on your foot, it's going to damage your foot somewhat.
Now we have this nonsense being peddled on the internet to muddy the waters even further.
Yeah. Dear, oh dear.
But anyways, these guys that are putting this stuff out there, again, how are they going to build waterproof locks 200 feet in the air? Oh, by the way, every time you let one of those 70-ton blocks down in place, you keep moving along and along and along. But there's a problem because now, once you've made the whole perimeter, you have to go up 5 feet higher, 10
Yeah.
feet higher. So that means you have to tear down the locks, move them up 10 feet higher, and start this whole process from scratch. Well,
Yeah.
you're telling me that this took 40 years to build these pyramids?
No, of course not.
I don't know what the heck they're using. To me, they look like sheepskins that they've blown or wineskins that they've just filled with air, and there's loads of them all over the place.
I mean, they had to come up with something. So, or it'd be sheep's stomach, probably. They can fill them with air. How did they fill them with air? How did they make sure that it was full of air? Because the amount of water displaced, this is the Archimedes principle, the amount of water displaced equals the weight which can be elevated. It's basic science that. There are so many other factors involved that the idea that you can do that is so ludicrous that point and laugh is about the best way to do it. Oh, look at what he's trying to do here. Where's the science behind it? Come on, guys, explain yourselves. Don't just say it. Anybody can say it. They were probably lifted up with balloons or spaceships.
There's people on here that even have the Nephilim building the pyramids for the humans.
Well, that's one explanation, I suppose. Where's the evidence, guys? Come on. You can say all these things, but you've got to produce evidence. Hard, factual, repeatable, identifiable evidence. You can't just say it and expect people to believe it unless you're just grifters who are making money.
I mean, nowhere
That's
in the
what,
Bible does it say anything about how giant the Nephilim were or how powerful they were. It says nothing.
yeah.
And when the flood came, it swept them all away with the rest of them. So these
Well,
guys with this water now, oh my goodness
dear,
gracious me.
it's ridiculous. Right, water can lift things. There isn't any doubt about that. I mean, I've been on locks. You let the water in one end. I was in a canal boat. The boat is lifted up by the water. The boat itself probably weighs 70 tons. It's 70 foot long, about 70 tons. So water can certainly lift that sort of weight. And then when you want to get out, you have to open the gates at the other end and you go out into the higher level.
And this is exactly what they were doing when they were demonstrating how the Great Pyramid was built.
Oh, that's a different story.
No, they weren't floating boats. They're floating 70-ton blocks each.
Yeah, which is fine. Show it. Come on, demonstrate it. Obviously, you're not going to get permission to use the Great Pyramid itself, but you can actually demonstrate it, like that NOVA program demonstrated how they couldn't build a pyramid unless they used a forklift truck to put or a crane to put the capstone on.
Oh, and that was a big crane too.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, that capstone probably weighed, what, a couple of tons, made of sandstone?
These guys were trying to drag it on a sled, on one of those old sleds. And that's what they were trying to drag this thing on. And they got it to the base and they gave up
Yeah,
because there was no way that they were getting it up any higher. They couldn't even get it up to the first level of the stone. So how did
ridiculous.
the Egyptians get that cap up there?
450 feet into the air.
Yeah.
And where is the capstone anyway? The capstone that was supposed to be on the Great Pyramid, it would be quite big.
So I guess somebody went up there with copper chisels and started hacking away at it. Well, that's not going to work either.
No, no,
Again, you go back to the tools. What were these people using for tools? They couldn't have been using copper chisels and rocks like they're claiming they were. And then you
yeah,
look at the quarries where they're quarrying out these huge blocks. Well, you see people that do it today and they'll take a chisel and they'll hammer a chisel in there and it'll just split. And there you go. But
yeah,
copper wouldn't do that. These guys are using iron chisels, and there was no iron chisels back in those days.
no, not at all.
So what were they using to split the rock with? Well, mainstream science says that they used those dolomite stones that were round, and they went down in the quarry and they kept hammering and hammering away, and you could see it today. There's all those strikes that have been taken out, and the stones are laying all over the place in the quarry. And they were claiming that there's thousands of men in there with these stones that just kept on chipping away at it. Okay, that's fine. They chip away at the bottom. Well, what happens if you have 100 men under there and that center that you're chipping away at breaks by accident and it tilts? Well, there goes all the men. They're going to be squished into bugs. But we don't even see that. How did they get those huge obelisks out of the quarry in the first place? Because they came out in one piece.
Yep, one piece. 500 tons they would weigh, some of those obelisks.
You can't drag that out with vine ropes,
No,
no matter how many men you have, because even if you put rollers underneath there, it's still on a little bit of an incline. So again, you have friction against you.
yeah, it's called physics. You got to examine and explain using physics how you do these things. Yeah,
I can see them using those stones and have thousands of workers in there smacking away at that granite. I can understand that because the evidence is there. That was one way that they did it because the stones are still there in the quarry that they were using to hammer away at it. But how did they get that entire obelisk out of there? That's the question. And again, the quarry could be up to 500 miles away, where they are removing the granite from. The
yeah,
point of the matter is that you're not going to be floating 70-ton blocks of granite on a reed boat up the Nile River.
and past the rapids, past all the obstructions in the Nile. There's no way it's going to work. No way at all. Reed boats may well be able to support a few people, but not 70-ton blocks of granite. There's no way you can build a reed boat big enough to do that
Oh, you
because
can
that,
using AI today.
oh, AI is magic.
And that's how they're doing it. They're showing this one boat that has loads and loads of these 70-ton granite slabs on them. And there's
Yeah,
hundreds of them. And the people look like little ants crawling all over these things. Well, they don't show you how they unloaded them. It
no,
just shows it docked. It shows the people jumping off into the water, getting ready to tie the barge up, and that's as far as it goes. You don't see them taking that granite off of that boat.
no, of course not. It would spoil the illusion, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, there's the fourth wall.
Yeah. Oh dear. It's sad. It's so sad that people believe, people will watch these and think, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. That's how they did it. You think reed boats on the Nile, you've got cataracts on the Nile, which is where huge blocks of granite are in the river and the water flows around them. You can't just take a reed boat or any boat through the cataracts and expect it to survive with a 70-ton block of granite on it. Forget it. It's not going to work. This is the article we're referring to. It's called 12,000-Year-Old Great Pyramid, written by Tony Bushby, who spends a lot of his time in libraries, archives, depositories, looking at basic information that goes back thousands of years in some cases, certainly hundreds of years, well before modern archaeological writings. Probably the most famous archaeologist in Egypt in the last 200 years is Flinders Petrie, who was an engineer by training, spent about 50 years in Egypt, measuring it, writing about it, and he was being financed by Exploration Society, financed by the church in the UK. And his mission originally, when he was sent to Egypt in about 1860, was to examine what he could see, measure what he could find, and report on comparisons and connections between the historical information he was identifying and the Christian Bible. He was trying to identify the source of the stories in the Christian Bible. He realized quite early on, privately, that that wasn't going to happen. There were very few connections that he could identify, but he was fascinated by the historical records that he could see within Egypt. And a lot of the evidence about the age of the Great Pyramid, that's the middle one of the three pyramids when you see them from overhead. You've got the one with the little stonework on top. You've got the middle one, which is the Great Pyramid, and you've got the small one, which is Menkaure Pyramid, the one with the big slash down the center. That's the small pyramid. It's the Great Pyramid, which has 8 sides, which you can only see if you know what you're looking for, or you see a photograph taken directly overhead when the sun is at the right position. You'll get the 8 sides of the pyramid shown. I've seen them, I photographed it. But the Great Pyramid, 12,000-year-old Great Pyramid by Tony Bushby. That's what we're looking at in this article in Nexus magazine. Part 1. Giza yields up a long-lost secret. For decades, Egyptologists have claimed the Great Pyramid was built as a tomb for a 4th dynasty pharaoh. Yet when we look beyond this conventional view, a far older reality begins to surface, preserved in ancient Arabic manuscripts and rare old photographs. These sources point to origins stretching back more than 12,000 years, challenging everything academia has asserted about the Great Pyramid. Taken together, they reveal a radically different understanding of Egypt's remote past, one that disrupts long-held assumptions in archaeology, cosmology, and historical scholarship. Scholars have long measured its angles, debated its purpose, and dissected its design, yet their analysis rarely grazed the surface of its true age and original intent. Now, that's just the introduction to the article. And the author, Tony Bushby, spent many years looking for the original documents, which he's identified many of them. He's translated many of them because they're in Arabic or Persian or even Siberian, Sumerian. There are so many different records located in random libraries, museums, archives around the world. So to have somebody who has dedicated his life to identifying the true story of the Great Pyramid, he deserves an audience. He deserves listening. And that is why Nexus magazine has published his 3-part article. It's quite rare for Nexus to publish a 3-part article, but because of its importance, Tony Bushby has received that honor. There are so many unanswered questions just about the Great Pyramid. Let's not worry about all the other unanswered questions around the world, but the Great Pyramid, how was it built, is one question.
Yeah.
Simple question. We can see it, it exists, it's there, it's a magnificent sight. How is it built? Why is it so accurately located on the planet's surface, almost at the dead center of the landmass currently existing on Earth? Extraordinary. How do you raise a 70-ton block of granite 200 feet into the air and place it very accurately, which is the ceiling of the Great Pyramid itself, comprising 70-ton blocks of granite, and there are 5 stories of them. Why are there 5 stories? Yet more questions. So it's quite legitimate to ask these questions now. One should not be considered a conspiracy theorist for asking them. It's a legitimate scientific question to ask anything. Why is this happening? How did that occur? Who did this? When did it happen? These are legitimate questions. There's nothing conspiratorial about it. This is how science works. Science is a method of establishing an answer to a question or a hypothesis, which is basically an advanced question. If you have a question, it can legitimately be asked, and it can be answered by anybody who can contribute the answer to it. That's how science works. That's how science progresses. Science is never, ever settled. It always advances. That is the whole point of science. Science has no emotion. Science has no agenda except to try to answer questions.
Well, there was another question. How would they, for example, tunnel through granite? Because you see some of these holes that are in the granite, but then you have other ones where you can only send a little robot into, and then you get these little doors. And the funny thing is with those doors or whatever they are that are sealing between the chambers, is that they have almost like door handles that are engraved into them. Then, when the robot got past that, when they asked for permission, they broke it down, they drilled it out, and then they sent the robot in further and it got to another one. And it was the same thing. Now there's another chamber on the other side. Of course, the Egyptian government would not allow him to knock that one out. But they did allow him to drill a hole in there and then
Yeah,
place a fiber optic camera in. And
yeah,
guess what, folks? There's another chamber in there, which most likely is going to lead to another one of those dividers. The thing is you would have to build the pyramid around the design of those chambers. So
yeah.
there's a lot of thought that went into this.
Oh, yeah, there is. That doorway with the 2 metal connectors, that's known as the Gantenbrink door, named after Rudolf Gantenbrink, who sent the first machine up. Those tunnels if you want to call them that, they're only 8 inches square. They're far too small for a human to go in. But 8 inches measured in frequency is the measurement of the hydrogen frequency. So there's a connection there with what we were talking about earlier. Christopher Dunn's book, The Giza Power Plant, he was talking about hydrogen being created within the Great Pyramid.
And hence you have Brown's gas that basically melts the granite.
Yep, Brown's gas will melt the granite. There are very few things that will cut granite. And you mentioned, how do you cut granite? Let's take the accepted view at the moment, 5,000 or 4,500 years ago. How do you cut granite? Right, today we can cut granite with diamond tip saws, diamond tip drills, because diamond is one of the very few minerals harder than granite as measured on the Mohs scale, MOHS, Mohs scale of hardness. But where are the diamonds? Where is the saw that can cut granite? Because we know there are saw marks on the coffer in the king's chamber. There are drill marks on the coffer in the king's chamber and in many other places.
Yes. And one thing that really amazes me is the fact that when they're building these sarcophagi and they're building the coffers, the lids for the sarcophagi, the lids are cut so perfectly rectangular. It's amazing. So again, how are they cutting this granite with so-called copper chisels and copper tools and those round saws that they claim to put sand on, and they just keep turning them and grinding them until there's a hole and a cut in the granite? I'm sorry, but that would take you hundreds of years to
Yep.
cut a lid that size. It's not going to work.
No, it's not going to work because copper does not touch granite. Any sculptor will tell you that they will not necessarily choose granite as their first choice material to make any sculpture because it is so hard to cut it.
And yet, look at the blocks that the pyramid's made out of. Those blocks are granite.
Yeah, they're granite.
So how on earth did they chisel that granite so precise? And not just Egypt. We're talking about places like Peru, Bolivia,
India, Japan.
but these places like the Mayan temples. Let's
Yeah,
look at the bricks in those.
yeah,
Let's face it, you can't even slide a credit card or even a piece of paper between those bricks. They're so precisely cut.
yeah.
Now let's go back to Egypt. Same thing. So what were they cutting or sawing that granite with?
That's a perfectly legitimate question to ask. And we look to science to find the answer. So far, we haven't found the answer. There are plenty of suggestions put forward using solar power, directing mirrors onto it. Concentrated sunlight could well cut it, but it takes a lot of effort to do that. And you have to have the mirrors available, the concave mirrors, to concentrate the sunlight. Maybe it is to do with rock softening liquids, which appear to exist in Peru. I have a friend whose son was marrying a Peruvian lady, and I knew he was going to go to Cusco. And I said, could you ask if any of the family know about the rock softening liquid? And he said, yeah, I'll ask them, which he did. And when he came back, he said, yeah, they know about it. It's available in Peru. It's made from plant material, combination of different plants. Like ayahuasca is a combination of two different plants which produce the effect. And there are stories of gourds, that's wooden bowls, containing a liquid. This is back in Colonel Fawcett's time, 1920s, when he was on an expedition in Peru and he came across a clearing. They were having a rest, he and his team, and they saw these wooden bowls on a rock. They said, what is it, to the local guides? They said they were very scared about it and they ran away. And eventually they got them back and one of the gourds was tipped over onto the rock. Nobody took any notice of it at first until they saw that the rock was starting to soften. It was like putty. You could remove it. And there are other stories of people walking through parts of the Amazon rainforest using boots which had spurs on them, metal spurs for riding horses. And they realized that they walked through certain plants, the spurs would disintegrate. They would be removed. And there is a bird in Peru, it's called the Andean flicker, which uses a particular leaf, which it finds in the forest, to rub onto a rock surface. because it wants to make a nest. And by rubbing this leaf onto the rock is softened to the extent the bird can peck it out and make his nest inside a hole.
So maybe that's what happened with the pyramids and the granite and Pumapunka and the Amazon and the Mayans.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
could be was available then to the people who inhabited the Amazon. They were familiar with the plants and the vines and the trees. They were aware that there were certain properties that some of these had.
well, one thing that's certain to me is that modern day science has sure come up a cropper on this one, because they certainly cannot repeat the formulas that were used back in those days to soften the material. The material. The material. The material.